Hey everybody, Trey here. Welcome to another forecast discussion. We have an active stretch of severe weather coming up today into tomorrow for parts of Texas. Today, the SPC has outlined a slight risk level 2 out of 5 in the yellow outlined area here. So places like San Angelo, San Antonio, Austin, under the gun for the greatest severe weather threat today going into tomorrow morning. Large hail is going to be the greatest threat with this activity. Here's the hail outlook. 15% hatched area within the main slight risk all the way down from Del Rio eastward towards San Antonio, Austin. Under the gun for potentially some very large hail that will start to maximize, at least the threat for very large hail in excess of 2 inches in diameter will maximize overnight tonight, late night tonight into the overnight hours into Sunday morning. Large hail going to be the main threat again with this event, but we do also have a tornado and damaging wind threat as well. Tornado threat is going to be focused from far west Texas, Midland, San Angelo, southeastward towards Austin, San Antonio, and eastward along a frontal zone into East Texas. Houston, Lufkin in that 2% risk area as well. The tornado threat is going to be very low with this particular setup. We'll go over some reasons why here in just a second, but there is a non-zero chance of maybe a tornado or two with the convection today into the overnight hours tonight. Damaging wind also going to be a threat with these storms as well. Then we go into tomorrow, Sunday, February 11th, and we have another slight risk outline for far east Texas. This is going to be moving out of Texas fairly early in the event tomorrow, so we don't have too much to worry about, but we need to get through the morning hours tomorrow morning before we can give you guys an all clear. So slight risk level 2 out of 5 here for far east Texas, places like Lufkin down toward the Houston Metroplex, over toward the Louisiana border, Beaumont, Orange, under the gun for that greatest severe threat tomorrow before things move off into Louisiana and Mississippi for tomorrow afternoon. Level 1 out of 5, marginal risk does extend back to the I-35 corridor, back toward Waco, but the greatest severe threat will be as the storms start to tap into a little bit better environment across East Texas tomorrow morning before things move off to the east. All hazards on the table for tomorrow, 2% and 5% tornado risk areas for far east Texas. That 5% barely comes into East Texas there, mostly for areas off to the east in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. But we do have a tornado risk that will accompany those storms tomorrow morning, as well as a large hail and damaging wind risk. So all hazards on the table with tomorrow's threat. Again, for places like Lufkin down toward the Houston Metroplex, over toward the Louisiana border. But again, things will be fairly quick to move out of Texas for tomorrow, and they'll have to deal with some snow on the backside up here across the western half of Texas as that cold air seeps down into the region. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and show you what's been going on this morning already. I'm recording this just before 9:30 a.m. Central Standard Time, and we've already had some strong to severe storms across central Texas near the Austin Metroplex. We've had some of these robust storms down here with a little bit of hail. This one to the southwest has had a severe warning on it this morning so far. So we have had some strong to severe storms already with this event, and we may continue to see this kind of thing through the rest of the day. Multiple rounds of storms, mostly elevated storms, not much of a robust severe threat at this point, but we have seen some larger hail out of these storms. But the tornado threat will remain very, very low, as I think the storms will remain quite elevated for some time until the main ingredients come in, which will be late this afternoon into evening and then the overnight hours tonight for that slight risk area. But we may see several rounds of convection along and north of a frontal zone that I'll show you here in just a second that will be seeping down into Texas. Those storms will pose a threat for maybe some large hail and a damaging wind gust or two if they can get closer to that frontal zone. But for now, mostly just a hail threat with these storms, and we could see a repeat of this as we go through the day today. All right, let's go and take a look at our upper air maps. This is at 500 millibars, so about 18,000 feet in the atmosphere. And this is what we've got going on right now. You see this trough that is digging down into the desert southwest. This is going to be our main player for our at least large-scale forcing for a severe weather event come tonight into tomorrow, as we have this trough that will continue to dig down, take on a positive tilt as it moves into the southern plains, and that will allow for the large-scale forcing that we need to get storms going in this environment. Going down to the surface, however, we have not seen a robust low-level response yet. Maybe a broad low-level cyclone here, a little bit of counterclockwise spin in the wind barbs there across New Mexico and West Texas, but not much going on yet as this trough is still hanging back here, and whatever happens in the upper levels of the atmosphere dictates what happens in the lower levels. So once this trough finally does move into the southern plains, Texas and Oklahoma tomorrow, that's when we're going to start to see a robust surface low start to develop, and that will modulate the overall area for severe threat tonight into tomorrow's event. And we'll show some model data here in just a second about regarding how that is going to progress over the next couple of days. But we should expect to see surface low development probably sometime late today as the trough finally starts to move in across the Rockies, the higher terrain of the Rockies, and move into parts of New Mexico and West Texas. And we'll see further surface low development as we go into the day tomorrow. Same thing at 850 millibars. Since we haven't seen a robust low-level response yet, we don't have a lot of low-level flow to deal with. Usually in robust severe weather setups in the plains, you want that strong belt of flow about a kilometer off the surface at 850 millibars or so, and we just aren't seeing that yet. And we're not really expecting to see a ton of that, a really strong belt of flow at 1 kilometer above the surface, that low-level jet that we often speak of. But we will see some increase in that probably overnight tonight into tomorrow, but we're not going to see anything crazy, and that is why a significant severe threat, at least a significant tornado threat, is not really on the table today or tomorrow. But we will see some increase in low-level shear going into tomorrow, and that's why there is a little bit of an enhanced tornado threat out there across East Texas for tomorrow's storms. Let's go down to the surface again, take a look at some raw surface data and show you what's going on here. So right away, you see that we have northerly or northeasterly winds across much of Oklahoma and North Texas, with more southerly flow out to the south. That means that we have a frontal zone that is sagging here across southern Oklahoma into North Texas. We'll probably put it somewhere in this vicinity here. A little tough to tell as the winds are a little bit chaotic here across the region since we haven't had that robust surface low development yet. But our frontal zone is right in here, and it's going to continue to sag to the south a little bit as we go through the day today. And that is going to modulate the northern end of the surface-based severe threat. Surface-based storms are when they are ingesting air that is rooted at the surface, and that can increase the tornado threat. Elevated storms do not produce tornadoes generally because they are elevated above the cooler air on the cold side of this front. You see 30s and 40s here north of the frontal zone, whereas we have 50s here to the south. That means that we have much colder air at the surface to the north, and any storms going on to the north of that frontal zone would be elevated in nature. Right now, we don't have a ton of instability to work with across south central Texas for these storms that are ongoing right now. So those storms are likely elevated as well. But once we start to see a little bit of warming throughout the day, we'll see those temperatures along and south of the front warm a little bit, and that will lead to surface-based convective development along and just south of the frontal zone in multiple rounds going through the day, starting late afternoon today into the overnight hours tonight. So that frontal zone again is going to continue to sag southward, and that will be our main boundary along which severe storms will focus today. Let's take a look at some soundings. Before we do that, actually, let's take a look at the moisture profiles. We do see that we have 60s dew points centered across south central Texas. 67, 68, 66 dew points here across south central and southeast Texas. So robust moisture is not far away at all, and that will probably just sit there throughout the day since we don't have the strong low-level flow that we would have if we had a robust surface low out here. It probably won't make much of an inland advance until we get that surface low to fully develop overnight tonight into tomorrow. We'll start to see that moist sector get pulled northward just a little bit, although models have trended downward a little bit and have backed off a little bit on the northward advance of the moisture. So the warm sector, that northern edge of the moisture where those 60s dew points can get to, that is going to modulate the severe threat, especially for tomorrow, because north of that, again, storms will tend to be elevated, but within the warm sector, that's where our surface-based convective development will take place. And so the northern extent of those 60s dew points, low to mid 60s dew points, will be our northern boundary for a robust severe threat tomorrow. And the models have backed off a little bit on that. We'll take a look at that in just a second. Let's take a look at a sounding from this morning. This is at Corpus Christi at 12Z. Unfortunately, we don't have an Austin sounding from this morning. The Weather Service office there does not release weather balloons. So our closest sounding that we have to this environment is at Corpus Christi. So it's a pretty good environment as it is well within the warm sector. 69-degree dew point at Corpus Christi, so very moist, low-level air. You see the red profile here, which is our temperature profile as the weather balloon goes up in the atmosphere, and our green profile, which is our dew point, so our moisture. Those are very, very close together, up to about 700 millibars. So we have very deep moisture coming in off the Gulf here situated across south central and southeast Texas. So, but very saturated, so probably some low-level cloud cover associated with this. And as you see, not much instability at all. We have a little bit of a warm nose here, just above 700 millibars. The temperature profile juts out a little bit. That is a little bit of a capping inversion in play. That's why these storms probably are a bit elevated right now and are only able to produce hail, at least the ones that are ongoing, and probably will be for any storms that develop through the early afternoon hours will probably remain elevated with limited instability to work with. Still can foster some severe hail, but the overall severe threat, the main severe threat, will come in again late this afternoon through the overnight hours tonight into tomorrow morning. So limited instability, just below about 200 joules per kilogram mixed layer CAPE, so very limited instability for these storms to work with, but enough to support a severe threat this morning. Now the wind profiles are looking pretty good. Long photographs here, indicative of very strong deep layer shear. We see that effective bulk shear over 70 knots. That is pretty darn strong. Usually for a severe threat with supercells, you'd like to see anything above 30 to 35 knots or so, and we're seeing basically over double that with this morning's wind profile. So very strong shear in play, which will foster a severe threat with these storms and the tendency for these storms to become supercells and several line segments, basically just overall organized convection in such a strongly sheared environment. Now, low-level shear has a little bit is a little bit to be desired if you're looking for tornadoes, which of course we're not. So this is a good thing at keeping the tornado threat at bay. Not much curvature in the low levels of the hodograph. Effective storm relative velocity above 170 meters squared per second squared. So there is a little bit of spin in the environment, and as that front sags southward, anything along that front will experience a little bit stronger low-level shear, and that's where our greatest tornado threat will be with anything close to that frontal boundary as it stalls out this afternoon into evening tonight. So, but still a very favorable profile for organized convection and severe storms. And again, the thermodynamics are going to have to work themselves out, but they should. We do have quite a bit of cloud cover over the region right now as we look at our visible satellite, but you do see a lot of clearing coming in from the west as these clouds are streaming in out of the southwest. That means we have strong southwesterly flow moving in across Texas, but as you can see here, lots of clearing back out to the west that is moving in. That should help destabilize the atmosphere as we go into the afternoon today, and will help instability build for a severe threat going into the late afternoon hours. All right, let's look at some model data here. This is our 12Z NAM, hot off the press this morning, and this will start off at 500 millibars to show you kind of the progression of this trough as it moves off to the east. So, as you can see, strong southwesterly flow already entrenched across the region, helping to support that strong deep layer shear over the region that we just looked at on our Corpus Christi sounding. But here's our main trough, situated still back here across the desert southwest. And we have that belt of strong flow on the backside that is going to try to make its way and round the base of the trough going into today, and that will mean it's undergoing a maturing process, and that's going to be a fairly mature, positively tilted trough as it moves into Texas over the next couple of days. You can see here that flow rounds the base of the trough, and we start to get a really tightly wound, robust trough going into the day tomorrow. Now, trough tilt we've talked about before can be important, and this is one of the reasons why we're not going to see a super robust low-level response with this setup. Usually, most of your severe weather events are going to take place with negatively tilted troughs, meaning if we were to draw an axis from the center through kind of the ski jump, if you will, of this trough, negatively tilted troughs tilt backward toward the left, whereas positively tilted troughs like this one, the axis tilts toward the right. And with positively tilted troughs, with negatively tilted troughs, that tends to foster a little bit better instability development as well as stronger shear. With a stronger, more tightly wound, negatively tilted trough, you tend to get a stronger surface response, so a stronger surface low, which means stronger low-level shear, stronger deep layer shear for supercells, and a better threat for possibly tornadic supercells if the ingredients are right, given that stronger low-level shear. With a positively tilted trough, the kinematics at play do not favor as strong of a low-level response. So that's why one of the reasons why we're not going to see a super strong surface low develop with this setup is because we have a very positively tilted trough here, and so the low-level response is not going to be quite as strong as it would be if this trough was more neutrally or negatively tilted. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to see severe weather with this trough. We definitely will see severe weather with this trough, but it may not be as robust if it were configured a little bit differently. But we'll still have the ingredients in place for a severe weather threat going into tonight, into tomorrow. And you can see as we continue on, going into Sunday evening, that trough is going to move out, and by early tomorrow we should see that those storms move out pretty quickly. And the timing of this trough is a little off for areas out to the east to maintain that robust severe threat across Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. But there will be enough southwesterly flow aloft to support severe storms out there tomorrow. But the timing of this trough is a little bit off, and that's one of the reasons we're not going to see a really significant outbreak with this particular system. Let's go down to the surface and see how the surface low is going to develop. Let's go ahead and zoom into our southern plains sector. So again, we start off the day, not much going on here at the surface, but as we go through the day, as that trough starts to really traverse the Rockies, we'll start to see a bit better defined surface low develop across West Texas, central Mexico, and those surface winds are going to continue to back and maybe strengthen a little bit out ahead of that, and will help that moisture maintain itself across south central and southeast Texas. And you can see exactly where the frontal zone is going to sag. This is at 0Z, so 6 p.m. Central Time this evening. The frontal zone located right along here. You see the wind shift and temperature gradient along here. 60s and 70s down to the south, 50s and 40s to the north with winds out of the northeast on the north side of the boundary, out of the south on the south side of the boundary. So a clear wind shift, clear temperature gradient, and that is where our frontal zone is going to set up. And as the trough moves in, we'll have strong forcing for ascent this evening, and that will allow storms to develop. Probably a couple rounds of storms will develop through the day today along and north of this frontal zone. Again, anything north of the frontal zone will remain elevated. If we can get any storms along the boundary here through the day today, going into this afternoon, we may have an outside chance for maybe a brief tornado or two and some hail, maybe a damaging wind gust. But the main round of severe storms is going to come tonight as the trough really starts to move in as surface low deepens a little bit. We'll see storms develop very close to that frontal zone. It will continue to sag just a little bit as we go into this evening. So our frontal zone by 6Z, which is going to be midnight tonight, somewhere down in here, and storms will fire here on the Edwards Plateau out in West Texas and move off to the northeast. Now, the storm motion, again, will be off to the northeast, so you can see the orientation of the frontal zone is a little bit more northwest to southeast, especially here across West Texas. So storms that fire here may have a tendency to cross the front pretty quickly, meaning that they will become elevated. But anything that remains south of the front or can interact with the frontal zone will have that greatest threat for a tornado or two and some damaging wind gusts. But otherwise, large hail is going to be the main threat tonight. As we'll see here in a second, the profiles are going to be favorable for large hail, especially any storms that do become elevated. Those elevated storms tend to be very efficient hail producers, and so we'll have to watch out for that as our main threat with the storms tonight. And we could see some hailstones in excess of 2+ inches in diameter. That front extends off into Louisiana and Mississippi, so we could see some severe storms out there across East Texas. More sporadic out here, a little bit farther removed from the forcing, but over here we could see a severe storm or two from southeast and East Texas northeastward into the Mississippi River Valley. Let's continue to tomorrow, and you will see as we go into the day tomorrow, we'll start to see that surface low really tighten across the southeast Texas coastal regions, and that will allow for that moisture, that warm sector out ahead of it, to foster a severe threat. Now, this has been a key change in the models over the last couple days. Let's go ahead and take a look at our dew points here. So our dew points, you can see broad 60s dew points out across Texas. That may be a little bit overdone here. We saw mostly 50s dew points off to the north, so maybe a little bit overdone with northward extent, but still a decent looking picture here. So you see that frontal zone sagging into this evening. That will foster, again, tendency for storms to become elevated as they cross the front. Any more surface-based convection down here will remain in the warm sector or just along the frontal zone. Then as that surface low develops, it will move off, that warm sector will move off to the northeast. We'll have the threat for southeast Texas into Louisiana and Mississippi through the day tomorrow. Now let's take a look at a couple of the previous model runs and show you how this warm sector has been progged over the last several runs. So this is our current run. You can see this is at 0Z, so 6 p.m. Central Standard Time tomorrow. Our warm sector extends from basically Houston northward to the Louisiana border and then out to the east south of our frontal zone. But watch what's happened since the last couple of days. This was just a couple days ago. This was the 6Z NAM from February 9th, so the midnight run on the morning of the 9th. So yesterday morning's run, early morning run, you can see that warm sector much more expansive across the southeast into East Texas. So that has been a big change, and that is going to modulate the overall severe threat. As I said, the northward extent of the boundary and the westward extent of that warm sector, that is going to modulate where the severe threat sets up. And a couple days ago, we thought it was going to be a pretty widespread area of severe storms possible, given the strong, significant northward advance of the warm front and broad warm sector here from East Texas into the southeast. But that has changed significantly, as you can see here. Much more suppressed moisture advance here. The warm frontal zone now located much farther to the south, and so that warm sector, at least the inland advance, the inland portion that is going to be within the warm sector, not nearly as expansive as it was a couple days ago. Still, we have enough room for severe storms here out from East Texas into the southeast, but it is not quite as expansive an area as it was a couple of days ago. So let's go ahead and take some soundings here. Let's go ahead and take some soundings from tonight. So we'll take some here just along the frontal zone here, just maybe east of the Del Rio area, so we can see the environment along and just south of the frontal zone. So again, this is just east of the Del Rio area, and this is what we're going to have going on for this evening. Pretty decent instability as we get clearing through the day and the trough starts to move in. That will usher in some very steep lapse rates aloft. The change in temperature as you go up in the atmosphere over 8 degrees Celsius per kilometer. We're looking at anything over 6 degrees Celsius to be unstable, and we're seeing quite a bit higher than that. So very strong instability here for these storms. Mixed layer CAPE in excess of 1,700 joules per kilogram. So plenty of instability to support robust storms. 65-degree dew point there just south of the front. Wind profiles remain very favorable for organized convection. Very long hodographs, 60-plus knots of effective bulk shear. And again, not a ton of curvature in the low levels of the hodograph. Maybe just enough to foster a bit of a tornado threat, especially with storms that can interact with the stronger low-level shear along the frontal boundary. But it's not looking like an overall robust threat for tornadoes. The main threat is going to be large hail with somewhat weaker low-level shear, strong deep layer shear for supercells, and fairly good instability, especially near that freezing level. And any storms that will cross the front will be more elevated and may have a better potential to produce significant hail as well. So that's what we've got going on for this evening. Let's go into tomorrow and show you some soundings here from across the region. So we'll take one here. This is going to be at 4 p.m. Central Time. The NAM may be a little bit on the slower side as far as getting this warm sector out of here. Let's take a look just really quickly at the GFS. So some of the models have trended a little bit farther west, so we may see a little bit of a severe threat linger a bit longer than what was expected, maybe into early to mid tomorrow afternoon before things move out completely. But let's take a sounding here tomorrow across East Texas. This will be at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time across East Texas. And we'll see what the soundings look like. And this is a pretty favorable sounding for severe weather. You can see robust instability, 1,800 joules per kilogram mixed layer CAPE, very moist low levels, that red profile and the green profile very close to each other, pretty far up into the atmosphere. So very moist low levels. Decent instability, still steep lapse rates aloft, strong 0 to 3 kilometer CAPE. So the instability in the lowest 3 kilometers of the atmosphere is pretty decent, over 100 joules per kilogram. Anything over 50 joules per kilogram tends to be what we consider favorable for kind of aiding in the stretching of any spin in the low levels into the vertical, and that can aid in tornadogenesis in any storms that encounter strong low-level instability. We do have a fairly good looking wind profiles for severe storms tomorrow as well. Long hodographs remain, strong deep layer shear across the region, and we have at least a little bit of curvature in the low levels of the hodograph, approaching 200 meters squared per second squared effective storm relative helicity. So that will be enough to foster a tornado threat with storms as they move into East Texas through the morning and early afternoon hours tomorrow. Now, it's not going to be a significant tornado threat, it doesn't look like at this point, given a somewhat muted low-level response. The low-level jet, that belt of winds at about 1 kilometer off the surface, not going to be super strong with tomorrow's threat. So that's going to keep the significant tornado threat at bay. But we do have enough low-level shear to support a tornado threat in this environment. Low-level winds veering and strengthening with height should foster a tornado threat as storms move into East Texas tomorrow before they move out. And then they'll move out of here probably mid to late afternoon at the latest. And then we'll be done with the severe threat for Texas. All right, let's look at some model data here, some convective allowing model data here. So this is going to give us at least an estimate of what the radar might look like through the duration of this event. So starting off this morning, you see a couple of those storms through central Texas, multiple rounds of convection here as that front sags southward. They'll have a tendency to cross the front, maybe some sporadic large hail reports with these storms this afternoon. And then we'll continue on, and this evening will be our main round of storms, as storms will start to fire up on the Edwards Plateau. This model has them firing about 6Z, so midnight tonight, out across the Edwards Plateau, and then they'll move off to the northeast. They'll probably quickly cross that front, as the front will continue to sag south a little bit, so they will be elevated north of the front. But those elevated storms are pretty prolific hail producers. They tend to be pretty prolific hail producers, so that's where we could see our significant severe hail come from, is this cluster of storms right here. And any storms that can remain along or south of the frontal zone may have that brief tornado threat and damaging wind threat with them. Those storms will continue into the morning tomorrow. Pretty decent activity going into the day morning tomorrow. This is at 16Z, so 10 a.m. Central Time. Tomorrow, those storms approaching the Texas-Louisiana border in East Texas. At that point, they may start to become a little bit more robust as the warm front lifts northward a little bit, along with the eastward progression of the surface low. So any storms that can interact with the warm front, especially across East Texas, will have that tornado threat, and then we'll see maybe some additional convection on the backside trailing into mid-afternoon tomorrow. Across East Texas, and then things will move off into the southeast, and we'll be done with the severe threat for Texas. Let's go ahead and look at another model here, the WRF ARW, and take these with a grain of salt. Take these convection allowing models with a grain of salt, as they don't do a great job at pinpointing, at perfectly pinpointing the environment, but at least it gives us an estimate of what we might see as we go through the day, the next couple of days. So again, multiple rounds of convection across Texas today, and then the main round will occur tonight as we see more storms fire up at or just after midnight across the Edwards Plateau. They will interact with that frontal zone, maybe a brief tornado threat, before moving north of the front and producing more of a large hail threat. And then those storms will move off into East Texas tomorrow before being out of here by late tomorrow afternoon at the latest. NSSL WRF model. We'll see much of the same, lots of convection through the day today, and then our main round comes in tonight, going into tomorrow with mostly a hail threat, and then things will be out of here by tomorrow evening, at which point they'll ramp up their tornado threat as they move into Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama going into tomorrow evening and overnight. So that's what things are looking like with this event. That is the severe side of things. Again, we do have that snow side of this event that we have to worry about. Going into the day today, we'll have some snow in the Texas Panhandle, and then the main event will come in tomorrow morning. Lots of snow here across the Texas Panhandle, West Texas, parts of Oklahoma as well. Lots of snow expected there on the backside of this system with the cold air that's seeping down behind that frontal zone, enough to produce some snow. Then Oklahoma will get it, then it moves into the Midwestern states, and then it will be out of here by Monday, late Monday, at least for Oklahoma and Texas. So that is what is going on with this particular event. Again, for today, we have a slight risk, level 2 out of 5 in the yellow shaded area here. So places like San Angelo, Del Rio, San Antonio, Austin, under the gun for the greatest severe threat today, maximizing tonight into the overnight hours tomorrow morning. Again, large hail is the main threat with this setup, especially down here in the hatched yellow area, where we could see some hailstones in excess of 2 inches in diameter. Again, multiple rounds of storms here that will probably remain elevated through the day today across central into eastern Texas. And then our main round fires up in basically probably midnight or so, or just after, across the Edwards Plateau. Storms move off to the northeast. And any storms that can interact with that front will have a brief tornado threat going into the morning hours tomorrow. That tornado threat is low. We'll see if they do increase it. I don't think they will, given the weak low-level shear in play and the tendency for storms to cross the front pretty quickly. But we do have a low-end tornado threat with these storms today. With any storm today could produce a tornado, but once the storms do cross the front tonight, they will become elevated and that will negate the tornado threat altogether for those storms. Damaging winds also going to be a threat as well, but on the low end, just like the tornado threat. And then tomorrow, slight risk remains in effect across East Texas, places like Lufkin, Houston, north parts of the Houston metro, toward Beaumont, Orange, Boona, out there toward the Texas-Louisiana border, under the gun for a severe threat tomorrow, level 2 out of 5. Slight risk. Storms will move through during the morning and early afternoon hours here. Outside chance of producing a tornado or two. Again, the greatest tornado probabilities are out to the east, but that area far east Texas under the gun for a tornado threat there, as well as the 2% extending back to the west toward the Houston metroplex. Damaging wind and large hail a threat as well tomorrow, and we'll see an all hazard threat with those storms as they move off to the east tomorrow morning and afternoon, and then things will be out of here by late tomorrow afternoon for Texas. So that's going to do it for this video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.